Bring in our panel now. Joining us as they do each Monday are two political strategists. Former Federal Labor strategist Bruce Hawker at the Sky News Centre. Here with me in Canberra, Grahame Morris from Barton Deakin. Good to see you both. Let's just start on the polls that came out this morning. First up, the News poll had Labor dropping back to a 32% primary vote after preferences now back to 44 to the Coalition's 56. A sizable margin, not as bad in the Galaxy poll out this morning, but still a big mountain to climb for Labor. There has been some despondency, as I mentioned earlier, Bruce, amongst Labor MPs about the way this year has started. What are you picking up?
Oh, when you get a swing of this size in the polls, David, it's inevitable that there'll be talk, but I think it's more in the nature of, look, we just need to put a line under what's gone on in the last week and really make the parliamentary session work well. So that tends to be the tone of what I'm hearing. There are some people who are scratching their heads about the decision to call the election or announce the election so far out, and then to have the resignation of the two ministers come hot on the heels. In other words, it's been more about a question of judgment than anything else. No one was able to control what happened with the Craig Thompson matter, so that's just one of those things that was always in the background and could have happened at any time.
The Prime Minister has said to caucus this afternoon that a number of people within caucus have been waiting to give negative assessments. We all need to make sure we're united. A call for unity there, Graham. When leaders have to call for unity in the party room, there is generally a problem there. But what do you think about the last week and some of the interesting twists and turns we've seen?
Well, let's start with today's polls. There can only be three reasons for today's polls. One is that the Prime Minister is back in the news after a Christmas break and she's making a mess of things again. That's one. The second is that Tony Abbott now has a blend in his message. He's still got the attack message, but he's blending it with some new messages that are more positive and directional. And the third is that the news poll itself is bouncing around a fair bit. And I suspect it's all of those. The Prime Minister's actually had a shocker of a couple of weeks. Tony Abbott has looked a lot better, and I think that news poll does have a bit of a sample problem. But when you look at it, when you look at what the Prime Minister has tried to do, everything she touched has turned to mud. You know, very strange decision to announce the election early and give the opposition, you know, all of that planning time. The Nova Peris thing was a complete mess. And how is it now that you know, the Labor Party can endorse an Indigenous person in the Northern Territory, but what's wrong with the Indigenous candidates and whatnot in Queensland, Western Australia? Why aren't they endorsed? And then you've got the reshuffle. And the Prime Minister, instead of saying, look, I'm sorry about this, you can understand people having a personal sort of personal reasons for leaving, she sort of covers the backside by saying, oh, I knew about it, you know, last year, 12 months ago.
That's been the problem, Bruce, as we discussed on Saturday, that admission by the PM front up that they came to her 12 months ago. She's sat on this for a while before announcing it this week after naming the election date. Now, the argument from the government, again, as we talked about on Saturday, is that there was a concern that announcing Chris Evans' resignation would open up a battle over the Senate leadership, which could become a quasi-leadership brawl for the Prime Minister as well, that she couldn't really afford last year. What do you make of that argument?
Yeah, sometimes it seems to me that the medicine is worse than the symptom that they're trying to treat. I mean, it seems to me that it's created, in a way, a bigger issue for the government by holding off the resignations of these two ministers rather than doing it a few months ago before the Christmas break. That would have seemed to me to be the sensible time to do it, because then the new ministers and parliamentary secretaries would have had the Christmas New Year period to ease into their portfolios, and certainly it would have had less of a look of you know, disorder in the way in which things unfolded in the last week. You can't undo any of that, though, David. You've just got to accept that that's happened. Judgments were made on those issues. They may have been correct, they probably weren't, and you need to move on. And we know from her experiences in the last 12 months that she's been further behind in the polls than this and has still managed to drag back to a very respectable position. Unfortunately, all that's been washed away in the last few weeks. Let's see if we can get off to a better start tomorrow.
Well, we shall see, and when Parliament does resume tomorrow, Stephen Conroy will be the Labor Senate leader, taking over from Chris Evans there, and Penny Wong, the Deputy Senate leader. Not a lot of people pay, Graham, a huge amount of attention to what goes on in the Senate, outside this building, of course. But does the Senate leader, what sort of impact will they have? Do they have? Well,
look, it is an important post because it's you are, in the Labor Party anyway, about number 3 now in the leadership pecking order. So you go to all the leadership meetings, you're involved in everything, but you also help run the Senate, and it's quite a difficult Senate. I think most people would be saying, well, look, Stephen Conroy and Penny Wong have pretty well been running the government in the Senate anyway. So there's not going to be much change, but it's a feather in their cap. It's an important post, and anyone who wins a political election like this in that sort of caucus, deserves a pat in the back.
And if Julia Gillard and Wayne Swan are out of action or overseas for any reason, Stephen Conroy becomes acting PM. Bruce, are you happy to see these two very strong supporters of Julia Gillard taking on the leadership roles in the Senate?
Look, to be quite frank with you, I always thought that the best performer in the Senate was Penny Wong, and I think I continue to be of that view, although Bob Carr, of course, has made a remarkable impact on that chamber. But the decision was the decision that they made, and there's no doubt that Stephen Conroy is a very experienced politician and a good manager of business, I suspect, because he does a little bit of business management inside the Labor Party as well. He's a key person inside the party, so he's used to that sort of very difficult forum that the Senate will always be, and is even more so in these straitened times when we have to deal with Greens and some crossbenchers as well.
Now, I also want to get your thoughts, both of you, on what we've seen in New South Wales Labor. Of course, it's been a terrible time for them with the whole Eddie Obeid ICAC hearing going on, and we'll be talking a bit more about that in just a moment with some further developments there today, his appearance before the hearing. But the New South Wales Labor leader, John Robertson, over the weekend has announced some pretty tough measures indeed to try and show that they're serious about fixing these problems, cleaning up the show. He's announced that all Labor MPs in the state parliament will have to declare their income fully from all sources. They will also, he wants to stop binding votes within caucus, so members of the left or right faction being bound to vote a particular way within caucus, assuming they still have to vote the Labor line in Parliament, but within caucus, trying to break down these sub-factions that can control bigger groups of MPs. Bruce, is he on the right path with all of this, or has he gone too far?
I think he's very much on the right path, and there's still further to go, in my view. But I don't think we should underestimate the importance of this speech that John Robertson made yesterday in Western Sydney. It's a very clear indication that he is going to stand up for cleaning out the New South Wales Labor Party, and frankly, it's a party that needs major change. So the fact that they're going to be breaking down the power of the faction leaders is particularly important. People would say, oh, well, he would say that, wouldn't he, given all the problems they've got? But I think he should be given credit for doing what other political leaders in the Labor Party have not been able to do to date. And I think, hopefully, in the coming months and years, we'll see further changes. I'd like to see the leader directly elected. I'd like to see the way in which the unions have 50% control of the party conference seriously examined. But it is a move very much in the right direction. I think John Robertson deserves to be commended for being able to push this through against some opposition within his own ranks.
Graham, what do you think? And in particular, this aspect of having to declare all sources of income.
Look.
Is that going to scare anyone off?
Yeah. Declaring income is fine, but what he's come up with is unworkable. All spouses have to declare their income. And I got news for him. There are a number of spouses in his own caucus, and certainly around the country, who would tell him to get stuffed. They're not going to declare what they earn. And children. You know, why should children be declaring this sort of stuff?
Well, I guess the problem is a dodgy MP could hide assets and income in their partner's name, but there's plenty of decent MPs who aren't doing that.
But there's blind trust, there's all sorts of things that this is just unworkable. And the other thing, it seems to me it only works for trade union members. It means that no farmer from here on in can stand for the Labor Party because they'd have to sell the family farm. No small business person can ever stand for the Labor Party because they'd have to get rid of their business. It is just unworkable. And apart from that, it is the wrong person to sell this message. What is the problem in New South Wales with all of these people? They've got two things in common. They're all members of the Labor Party and they're all trade union people. And guess what? The fellow trying to do this is the Labor Party parliamentary leader and he's the former leader of the trade union movement. You need a Kevin Rudd or somebody.
That's not an argument against it, David or Graham. That is not an argument against it. That's just a demonstration of the fact that this fellow is making some really tough decisions, probably against the against the interests of people who would be very disappointed with these actions, union officials and the like. I think this is an important move on his part, and he should be given credit for doing it. And frankly, we're looking every day at what's happening in New South Wales at the ICAC hearings and so forth, and we are in need of a big clean out, and it's happening, and I think he should be given credit for doing so.
Well, that's true, but look, there's blood all over the war field or the battlefield in the Labor Party, and he's shouting for band-aids. It is a stunt.
Well, we are going to explore further the issue that lies behind a lot of what John Robertson's doing here, and that is the ICAC hearings into alleged corruption involving former Labor ministers, in particular Eddie O'Bee before that ICAC hearing. We'll be hearing more about that in a moment. But Grahame Morris, Bruce Hawker, good to talk to you again today. Thanks. We'll catch up next